It is deeply concerning to hear that Nigeria's airspace is not safe. David Hundeyin, an investigative journalist, tells it all in an interview with News Central. For how long will the government of Nigeria be playing games with the lives of her people? If for 3 years there hasn't been a primary radar coverage, then the rot is deeper than one thinks. If these allegations are authentic, which they seem, Nigeria's aviation ministry has a lot of questions to answer. The aviation minister, Mr. Festus Keyamo, and his team need to assure Nigerians and other passengers of their safety. Listen to David Hundeyin's interview and hear for yourself. Also, please subscribe to this channel, like and share. Thank you. We'll see you in our next one. Bye.
Concerns have been raised over the safety of the Nigerian airspace by investigative journalist David Hundeyin. On his X handle on Friday, Hundeyin said that Nigeria has had no primary radar coverage in its airspace since 2021. And this, he said, means that when an aircraft in Nigeria's airspace turns off its transponder, like any aircraft smuggling guns, drugs, or conflict minerals would do, Nigerian air traffic controllers have no way of identifying the aircraft. He cited a memo from the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority warning aircraft operators over a recent incident where an unauthorized aircraft strayed into restricted areas in the airspace above the presidential villa in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. And joining us on the news to take a deeper bite into the story is the journalist David Hundeyin. David, it's nice to have you join us on the news.
Thank you for having me.
So let's begin with the main thrust of your post, which actually traced the historical developmental pattern of Nigeria and DR Congo to the same foundation that is getting independent on a platter. Of course, I'd like to find out what you mean in terms of this. Of course, I need your clarification on it.
So the crux of what I was trying to communicate was that in my opinion, the most significant reason behind the continued systemic dysfunction in both countries is that the foundation that both countries had in terms of the independence that they got was not an independence that was actually won through some sort of broad-based struggle, but was actually sort of negotiated with the elites of those countries, and that the elites, being the petty, immature people that they are, who are unable to work together, who are unable to share power, who are unable to see the bigger picture, shortly devolved into petty ethnic squabbling and fighting with each other, which led to military dictatorship and ultimately the destruction of both economies. And I drew a parallel between both countries, that there's a very striking parallel between the paths that the DRC and Nigeria have taken since their supposed independence in the both in the year 1960. Now, where this aviation memo that you referenced came into the conversation was that I was making the point that in addition to all the other similarities that these countries have, they are also both global hotspots for illegal arms smuggling, weapons trafficking, for drug smuggling, and for conflict minerals trafficking. And to back up this assertion, I showed a circular that was sent by the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority in April to all aircraft operators in Nigeria, where the NCAA basically said that they had received a notification from the Office of the National Security Advisor that an unidentified aircraft had been sighted in restricted airspace above the Aso Rock Presidential Villa. And the letter was essentially reminding aircraft operators to stay out of restricted airspace. Why I thought that it was interesting to flag this was that for the past few weeks, I've been going back and forth with people who are within the aviation system. Obviously, you know that I cover the aviation airspace in Nigeria as a journalist very frequently. And one of the consistent pieces of feedback that I keep on getting is that air traffic control in Nigeria, at least in the civil aviation space in Nigeria, is by the grace of God, as we say, because since 2021, there has been no primary radar coverage in Nigeria's airspace. So there are two types of radar coverage. There's primary radar and a secondary radar. So basically, they're both supposed to work together. So what secondary radar gives you is just a general sense of position in that an aircraft is there. Primary radar is what is able to specifically pinpoint the location, the exact location of an aircraft. Now, both types of radar are supposed to work together to create total radar coverage in Nigeria's airspace. So, what primary radar gives you is the ability to pinpoint the location of an aircraft,
Okay.
even if it has turned off its transponder, right? And what I had been getting from my sources consistently over the past few weeks and that's not just from within the Civil Aviation Authority, that's within the Airports Authority as well, that's within the what's it called, Aerospace Management Authority as well, NAMA, is that there is no primary radar coverage in Nigerian airspace. So basically, on a daily basis, you have dozens of aircraft flying through Nigeria's airspace, and the air traffic controllers keep on hailing this aircraft that please come in, and they don't know who it is. They
But
don't know
David,
who is flying through Nigerian airspace.
I'm just looking at a particular headline now, and that helps us understand where we are and where Nigeria should have been. And that has to do with a publication of April 7, 2023, saying that Nigeria received some air control equipment from Argentina. And when we have those kind of equipments that are meant to safeguard or moderate the operation of air traffic and ensure safety, and of course be able to prevent any sort of criminal activities that may be going on within that space, and we do not have those equipment on ground doing their job, the question we want to ask is that where are they? Would you say that they were deliberately taken out, not installed, not used? There's someone that's trying to sabotage the system deliberately. We may need to understand that too.
So again, you would have to pose that question to the Director General of the Nigerian Aerospace Management Agency, NAMA, because as you have rightly said, the equipment is there. It exists. The budgetary provisions for these things have been made. So it's not an issue of the Nigerian government not investing in those things. The money is there and it has been paid. So the money is there, the equipment has been bought to a large extent, and yet the coverage is not there. So you then have to ask the question to NAMA that in whose interest is it for not only the primary radar coverage in Nigerian airspace to be down, which by the way is a large part of the reason why many transcontinental flights, especially coming from Southern Africa, instead of flying directly through Nigerian airspace, especially at night, they prefer to circumnavigate Nigeria. They prefer to go around Nigeria and pass through, Cameroon and Niger instead of passing through Nigerian airspace, which would be cheaper and more direct. The reason is that there is no primary radar coverage in Nigeria. So they're afraid that if there is an emergency or if they go down, they won't even be found. Which is by the way, it has happened in Nigeria before where an aircraft went down and we didn't know where it was. This is a result of not having primary radar coverage. So you have to ask the MD, sorry, not the DG, the MD of the Nigerian Aerospace Management Agency, that why have these things not been put in place? And if the MD cannot give an answer to that question, then you then also have to ask the question that who is benefiting from a situation where aircraft can fly through Nigeria's airspace and we don't know who or what is on those aircraft. We can't do anything about it. We simply don't know. So in a situation where, for example, much of the audience may not know this. On paper, Nigeria has 19 functioning airports. In reality, if you add together Nigeria's airports and airstrips, including airstrips that most of us have never heard about, Nigeria has well over 50 places where an aircraft can land and take off from around the country.
Yeah.
So, and aircrafts are using these airstrips. What are they using these airstrips to do? And how is it that aircrafts without transponders are taking off and landing out, flying through Nigeria's airspace, and we don't know what is on them.
Uh,
We don't even know what these aircraft are.
so
So the
basically,
so
we're talking about a porous airspace, just as we have porous land borders. And in a very recent report, one of the governors in Nigeria said that, oh, some bandits or some kidnappers were apprehended uh, they confessed to killings and they were handed to the authorities, and the court actually granted them bail. I begin to ask the questions: is it that the Nigerian government is complicit when it comes to the safety of Nigeria as a country, of
I would argue.
Nigerians? I mean, we need to
I
put
would,
that in
I would argue.
perspective.
I would argue absolutely because first of all, bear in mind that those headlines that you cited a few minutes ago, where you said 80% of Nigeria is now covered by ground radar. First of all, that's an attempt to mislead the public because the ground radar is different from airspace radar. So that's an attempt to mislead the public into thinking that Nigeria's airspace is covered. That's ground radar. So already that's an attempt to insult the intelligence of the public and to create the idea that something that is not the case is the case. The purpose of ground radar is to monitor the position of airplanes on the ground, not airplanes in the air. So already from that point of view, you can see that someone in the government is trying to be clever by half. And then secondly, it's not just about the equipment and the systems in place, it's also even the people. So if you speak to people who work in the space, for example, the air traffic controllers, you may or may not know this, Nigerian air traffic controllers are the worst paid in the world, not in Africa, in the world. And I have the numbers to prove this here. So I don't know if you can see the numbers on this. So I went to the trouble of printing these numbers actually. So you can see the numbers for countries like Ghana. You can see the numbers for the ASECNA countries. That's the countries in French, Western, and Central
Mm.
Africa. You can see the numbers for countries that are within the European aerospace zone. You can see the numbers for the US. You can see all this, and then you can see Nigeria. The equivalent of $322 a month
Mm.
for an air traffic controller. So I was speaking to an air traffic controller recently, and he said they have to do side hustles to survive. So an air traffic controller whose attention is supposed to be focused exclusively on keeping Nigeria's airspace safe, airspace that we all use, including you that I'm speaking to, this air traffic controller's attention is divided. He's selling clothes, he's doing drop shipping on WhatsApp, he's doing side hustles, he's selling real estate, selling cars, just putting together one or two things just to be able to pay their bills. An
So,
air traffic controller has to do that.
so
That is, there's no way you can look at that situation and say that the government does not know that the Nigerian government is paying air traffic controllers 3 times less than what the Ghanaian government pays air traffic controllers. Is Ghana a wealthier country than Nigeria? Is Ghana in a better financial, economic situation to Nigeria? No, it is not. So that can only mean logically that someone within the government or that a group of people within the government are intentionally sabotaging the safety of Nigerian airspace, or at least the proper operation of the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, which then begs the question, who are these people and what is their goal?
So when we have a country that frolics with negligence of duty in this scale, what danger do you think that country could be plunging itself into on a wider scale?
Well, for one thing, where you have the NCAA sending out a circular that the Office of National Security Advisor is seeing unidentified aircraft flying above the presidential villa. First of all,
Mm.
the very implication of that, that there's an unidentified aircraft that is able to violate some of what should be the most restricted airspace in Nigeria. What that basically means is that Nigeria does not have any national security whatsoever. So if you recall, last year when there were noises of, for example, going to war with Niger. What that means is that if, for example, Nigeria were to go to war with Niger, especially now that Niger is now in a military partnership with the Russian military, if the Russian Air Force were to take any sort of interest into striking targets in Nigeria, it means that Nigeria's airspace is not protected, including what should be the most protected airspace, the seat of government,
Oh.
where the president himself is. So if that airspace is not restricted, that also means that the airspace around military installations too would not be restricted. That has already told me that if a civil, we don't even know whether it's civilian or it's military, an unknown aircraft can
Oh.
violate the airspace above the presidential villa, then that means that the airspace above, let's say, the Tactical Air Command in Makurdi, which is Nigeria's largest air force base,
Oh.
or the military base in Kachia, which is Nigeria's largest armory, or the Ikeja cantonment, or Dodan barracks, or Mogadishu barracks. These are all strategic military locations in Nigeria. That means anybody can fly and violate those airspaces and drop whatever they want to drop on them. So Nigeria has
Oh.
essentially no internal defenses, and it's there for the taking. And probably the only reason why we're not in total chaos right now is because we don't actually have any neighbors who are hostile or belligerent to us yet. But what it means is that everyone will be taking notes. Everyone around us will be taking notes, especially now that the world is heading toward a sort of conflict era where people
Yeah.
are going to start taking sides. It's like the 20th century all over again. There's going to come a time when we are going to have to come to terms with the reality that we are a country of 200 million people, 993,000 square kilometers, with no internal defenses. We're just there for the taking. Anyone can come and claim bits of our territory, and we can't do anything about it because some people have an interest in deliberately weakening the air defense or the air security of Nigeria because of whatever reason.
Okay.
Whatever reason it is, who knows whether it's with minerals trafficking, blood, conflict minerals, weapons, guns, drugs, whatever it is.
Well, David, I tell you, this is a big issue that we cannot wish away, and we hope that the Nigerian government will be able to step up into sanitizing the country in all aspects to ensure that we are safe. David Hundeyin, journalist, thank you so much for your extensive
Thank you for having me.
contribution on the news.